The alien ship drifted in space like a dying bird. Its lights flickered on and off in the darkness. Inside the metal walls, Kethfa pressed her thin fingers against the control panel. Her purple skin had turned pale gray. She was dying, just like the rest of her crew. The Zelari research ship called Harmony's Edge had been exploring space for 2 years. They were scientists, not fighters. They studied plants from different worlds and tested air samples from new planets. It was peaceful work that helped other species learn about the galaxy. But now, something terrible had happened to them. 3 days ago, their air cleaning system broke down. A strange sickness spread through the ship like poison in water. By one, her crew members got sick. They could not eat. They could not sleep. Their bodies were shutting down, and nothing in their medical bay could help them. Kethfa looked around the control room. Her friend Veltar lay unconscious in his captain's chair. His breathing was weak and slow. The other crew members were scattered around the ship, too sick to move. Some had already stopped breathing completely. She knew they were going to die. All 12 of them would die here in this cold, empty space, far from their home world. No one would even know what happened. To them, their families would wait and wonder, but no answers would come. The Zelari were not important in the big galaxy. They had no powerful friends. They had no strong military to protect them. Other alien species saw them as harmless researchers who posed no threat to anyone. When Zelari ships disappeared, most governments just marked them as lost and moved on. But Kethfa was not ready to give up. She had one last idea, even though she knew it probably would not work. She could send out a distress signal. Maybe someone, somewhere, would hear their call for help. Her hands shook as she worked on the communication system. The ship's power was failing, so she had to use the emergency transmitter. It was old and not very strong, but it was all she had left. She programmed it to send the same message over and over again in all directions. "This is the Zelari research ship Harmony's Edge," she spoke into the recorder. Her voice was weak, but she tried to sound clear. "Data, we are requesting immediate medical help. Our crew is dying from an unknown sickness. We have 12 people on board. Our air systems have failed. We need help right now." She added their location coordinates to the message and set it to repeat. Then she sat back in her chair and closed her eyes. The signal would travel through space for days or weeks, but she doubted anyone would answer. Who would risk their lives to help a few dying Zelari researchers? Far away in a different part of space, the human ship called Defiant Dawn moved through the starfield like a metal shark. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge, watching the stars through the big window. He was a tall man with short brown hair and serious eyes. He had been in space for 15 years, protecting the borders of human territory. The Defiant Dawn was a patrol ship with 35 crew members. They were soldiers, but their job was usually boring. They flew the same routes every week, looking for smugglers or pirates. Most of the time, they found nothing but empty space and distant stars. Jake liked his crew. They were good people who worked hard and trusted each other. Lisa Barnes sat at the communication station, listening to radio signals from across the galaxy. She was young, with red hair and quick fingers that danced across her controls. Dr. Peter Grant worked in the medical bay below. He was the ship's doctor, a man who had saved many lives during his career. Amy Rodriguez was their navigator, a woman who could find her way through any star system. They were like family to Jake, and he would do anything to protect them. "Captain," Lisa called out from her station. "I'm picking up something strange." Jake walked over to her. "What is it?" Lisa frowned at her screen. "It sounds like a distress call, but it's in a language the computer doesn't recognize completely. The translator is working on it." Jake waited while the computer processed the signal. After a few minutes, words appeared on Lisa's screen. Translation was not perfect, but the meaning was clear. Someone was dying and needed help. "It's from a ship called Harmony's Edge," Lisa reported. "They say their crew is sick and their life support is failing. The signal is coming from about 2 days away at full speed." Jake studied the information on the screen. He recognized the language pattern now. These were Zelari, a species of peaceful researchers. Humans had met them a few times before, but they usually kept to themselves. They were known throughout the galaxy as harmless scientists who never bothered anyone. Sir Amy called from the navigation station. If we respond to this call, it will take us 2 days off our patrol route. Command won't be happy about that. Jake, I thought about this. Their orders were to patrol the border and watch for enemy ships. If they left their assigned area, they might miss something important. Their commanding officers would probably be angry. But he also thought about the dying aliens sending their desperate message into empty space. Dr. Grant's voice came through the ship's communication system. Captain, I just reviewed the medical data from that distress call. These aliens don't have much time left. Maybe a few hours. Maybe less. Jake made his decision quickly. Amy set course for their coordinates. Maximum speed? Amy looked surprised. Sir, are you sure? These are just Zelari researchers. They're not even allied with us. Jake turned to face his crew. He saw confusion on some faces, worry on others. He understood their concerns, but his choice was already made. Listen up, everyone, he said in a strong voice. No, this isn't our assigned mission. I know these aliens aren't our allies or our friends, but they're dying and they asked for help. That's enough for me. He paused and looked at each crew member. We're human beings. Don't walk away when someone needs help, even if they're strangers. Even if they're different from us. That's who we are. Lisa nodded first, then Doctor. Grant's voice came through the speaker again. I agree, Captain. My medical oath doesn't care what species someone is. Amy began entering the new course into her computer. 2 days at full speed, sir. We'll reach them before their air runs out. As the Defiant Dawn changed direction and sped toward the dying alien ship, Jake felt good about his choice. He did not know that this decision would change everything. He did not know that other ships were watching and waiting. He did not know that answering this simple distress call would start something much bigger than a rescue mission. On the Zelari ship, Kethva felt her strength fading. She could barely keep her eyes open. Most of her crew had stopped moving completely. The ship's systems were failing one by one. Soon, there would be no power left at all. But her distress signal kept transmitting, sending their desperate message into the vast darkness of space. She had no hope that anyone would hear it or care enough to help. There lives for a few dying researchers from an unimportant species. She did not know that help was already on the way. She did not know that somewhere in the distance, 35 humans had heard her call and were racing through space to reach her. She did not know that everything she believed about the galaxy was about to change. 2 days passed like a nightmare for the crew of Harmony's Edge. Kethva drifted in and out of sleep, her body growing weaker with each hour. The ship's lights dimmed as the power systems failed one after another. The air tasted strange and bitter. She knew death was coming soon. Then something impossible happened. Her communication system came alive with sounds she had never heard before. A voice spoke in a rough alien language that made her heart skip with fear. Slari. Vessel Harmony's Edge. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the human ship Defiant Dawn. We received your distress call. We are here to help you. Kethva stared at the communication panel in shock. Humans, the terrifying Deathworlders, had actually come. She had heard stories about these creatures throughout her life. They came from a world so dangerous that most species would die there in minutes. They were warriors who knew only violence and conquest. What did they want with her dying research? Crew, her hands trembled as she activated the voice transmitter. This is Science Officer Kethva. Our captain is unconscious. Most of our crew is already dead. Her voice was barely a whisper. Why did you come here? Jake's voice came through the speaker again, but now it sounded gentler. Because you asked for help and we don't leave people to die alone. Outside her ship, Kethva could see the human vessel through her small window. It was dark gray and covered with weapon systems. It looked like a predator built for war, not rescue. Fear filled her chest as she watched it move closer to her ship. On the Defiant Dawn, Dr. Peter Grant worked quickly in his medical bay. He studied the biological data from the Zelari distress signal, while his team prepared for the most unusual rescue mission of their careers. His assistant nurse Helen Carter organized medical supplies while biotech specialist Kevin Walsh ran tests on his computer. "Doctor, I've never treated aliens before," Helen said nervously. "What if we make them worse?" Dr. Grant looked up from his screen. "Then we'll learn as we go."
But we can't let them die without trying. Kevin pointed at his
computer screen. "Doctor, look at this. This isn't a natural sickness. Someone made this disease specifically to kill Zalari. Look at how it attacks their immune system. It's too perfect, too targeted." Dr. Grant studied the data more carefully. This was a biological weapon designed to kill these specific aliens. As someone had wanted the Zalari research team dead, and they had used a weapon that would leave no obvious traces. "Captain Morrison needs to know about this," Dr. Grant said. "This wasn't an accident. Someone murdered these people." On the bridge, Jake received the doctor's report with a grim expression. Someone had tried to kill the Zalari crew, probably, to steal their research or to stop them from reporting something important. But who would do such a thing to harmless scientists? Sir Lisa Barnes called from her communication station. "I'm detecting another ship in the area. It's staying hidden behind that asteroid field about 3 hours away. Whoever it is, they don't want us to see them." Jake felt his warrior instincts wake up. Someone was watching them, probably the same people who had poisoned the Zalari. Had expected the alien crew to die quietly with no witnesses. The arrival of a human patrol ship had ruined their plans. "Keep monitoring that ship," Jake ordered. "Don't let them know we've spotted them. Right now, our job is to save these aliens." Dr. Grant's voice came through the communication system. "Captain, I think I can create a treatment for the biological weapon, but I need to work fast. The Zalari don't have much time left. Maybe an hour or two at most." Jake nodded. "Do whatever you need to do, Doctor." On the Zalari ship, Kethva watched her Captain Veltar struggle to breathe. His skin had turned almost white, and his eyes were closed. Around the ship, the rest of her crew lay still and silent. She was the only one still conscious, and barely so. The human voice came through her speakers again. "Kethva, we're going to help you, but you need to trust us. We're preparing a medicine that should stop the poison in your bodies." "Poison?" Kethva asked weakly. "Yes, someone used a biological weapon against your crew. This was not an accident. Someone wanted you dead." Kethva felt sick, and not just from the poison. Who would want to kill peaceful researchers? They had no enemies, no political importance. They were just scientists studying plants and air samples from distant worlds. Dr. Grant worked like a man racing against time. He mixed chemicals and tested formulas while his team helped him. The Zalari biology was different from human biology, but not completely alien. He thought he could create an antidote, but there was one big problem. Captain Dr. Grant called over the communication system. "I've made the medicine, but I can't transmit it through space. Someone has to go over to their ship and give it to them directly. The problem is, whoever goes over there will be exposed to the biological weapon. The volunteer would be risking their life to save aliens they had never met. It was dangerous, and there was no guarantee the protective suit would be enough." "I'll go," Jake said immediately. "No, sir," came a voice from behind him. Marine Sergeant Tony Clark stepped forward. He was a big man with kind eyes and steady hands. "That's my job, Captain. You're needed here to command the ship?" Jake looked at Tony with respect. The sergeant was volunteering to risk death to save strangers. "Are you sure about this, Tony?" Tony nodded. "Yes, sir. We came here to help them." Someone should actually do the helping. Within an hour, Tony was suited up in the ship's best protective gear. The medical team had prepared doses of the antidote for each surviving Zalari crew member. Tony would have to inject each alien personally, while surrounded by the deadly poison that had nearly killed them all. Dr. Grant checked Tony's suit one more time. "Remember, don't touch anything you don't have to. Get in, give them the medicine, and get out." "We don't know how long the suit will protect you." Tony nodded and walked toward the airlock. Behind him, the entire crew of the Defiant Dawn watched. With pride and worry, they were seeing something special, something that defined what it meant to be human. When someone needed help, humans answered, even if it meant risking their own lives. The space between the two ships was cold and empty. Tony used his suit's small rockets to fly across the gap, carrying a bag of medical supplies. As he approached the Zelari ship, he could see through their windows. The aliens inside looked like they were already dead. Kethva watched the human figure float toward her ship. She had never seen a human before, but she could tell this one was trying to help her. It seemed impossible. Everything she had been taught said humans were violent predators who only cared about fighting and conquest. But here was one risking his life to save her and her crew. Tony entered the Zelari ship through their emergency airlock. The air inside smelled terrible, full of the poison that was killing the crew. He moved quickly from room to room, injecting each unconscious alien with the antidote Dr. Grant had created as he worked. Tony noticed how small and fragile the Zelari looked. They were about the size of human children, with thin purple skin and large eyes. They looked nothing like the monsters humans sometimes fought in space. They looked like people, just different people. When he reached Kethva, she was barely conscious. Her large eyes looked at him with wonder and fear. "Why?" she whispered through her translator device. "Why would you risk your life for us?" Tony gently gave her the injection, then sat down beside her for a moment. "Because you needed help," he said simply, "and because it's the right thing to do." As the medicine began to work, Kethva felt strength slowly returning to her body. Around the ship, other crew members began to stir and breathe more easily. The humans had actually saved them. The terrifying Deathworlders had risked everything to rescue a crew of strangers. For the first time in her life, Kethva began to wonder if everything her species believed about humans was completely wrong. As the hours passed, the Zelari crew slowly came back to life. The human medicine worked like magic, pulling them back from the edge of death. Kethva was the first to fully recover her strength. She sat up in her bed and looked around at her crew members, who were breathing normally for the first time in days. Captain Veltar opened his eyes and spoke in a weak voice. "Kethva, what happened? How are we alive?" "The humans saved us," she replied, still hardly believing the words herself. "The Deathworlders came to help us." Veltar looked confused. Like all Zelari, he had grown up hearing stories about the terrible humans who came from a world of constant danger. They were supposed to be monsters who only understood violence and war. Yet here they were, alive because humans had risked their lives to help strangers. "Jake." Morrison's voice came through their communication system. "The Zelari crew, this is Captain Morrison. How are you feeling?" "Much better, Captain Morrison," Kethva replied. "We owe you our lives, but I must ask you something. Why did you help us? Your species and ours barely know each other." Jake's answer came quickly. "Because it was the right thing to do. That's all the reason we needed." Dr. Grant's voice joined the conversation. "I need to tell you something important. The sickness that nearly killed you was not natural. Someone made it specifically to kill Zelari. It was a biological weapon." Kethva felt cold fear run through her body. A weapon. But who would want to kill us? We are just researchers. Study plants and analyze air from different worlds. We have no enemies. Captain Veltar struggled to sit up. "Kethva, tell them about what we found on Kreshai." Kethva hesitated. The discovery on Kreshai was supposed to be secret until they could report it to the Zelari government. But these humans had saved their lives. She felt she could trust them. 3 weeks ago, we were studying the dead planet called Kreshai, she began. It was destroyed long ago in an ancient war. We were looking for plant samples that might have survived in underground caves. She paused, remembering the moment that had changed everything. We found more than plants. We discovered a hidden facility left by the predecessor race. Inside were weapons unlike anything we had ever seen. Biological weapons, energy weapons, things we could not even identify. On the human ship, Jake and his crew listened carefully. Predecessors were a mysterious race that had vanished millions of years ago. They had been incredibly advanced, and their technology was far beyond what any current species could create. Finding a cache of their weapons would be the discovery of the century. We took detailed scans and samples, Kethwa continued. We were planning to report everything to our government when we got home. but someone must have been watching us. Someone who wanted those weapons for themselves. Intelligence Officer Ryan Murphy ran a deep scan of the area around both ships.
What
He found made his blood run cold. Captain, we have a problem. That ship hiding behind the asteroids is moving toward us. It's a hegemony cruiser, and it's 3 times our size. Tada! Jake felt his stomach drop. The hegemony was a group of warlike alien species that had been conquering smaller worlds for decades. They were ruthless and powerful, exactly the kind of people who would kill researchers to steal ancient weapons. All crew to battle stations, Jake ordered. This is not a drill. On the Zelari ship, Kethwa heard the alarm sounds coming from the human vessel. Captain Morrison, what is happening? The people who tried to kill you are coming back to finish the job, Jake replied. And they probably want to destroy us too, since we're witnesses. The hegemony cruiser called Dominion's Fist moved out from behind the asteroids like a metal mountain floating through space. It was massive and covered with weapon systems. Commander Zarthok sat in his command chair, angry that his perfect plan had been ruined by interfering humans. The biological weapon should have killed the Zelari quietly, with no one knowing what had happened. He could have claimed their ship had suffered an accident, then taken the predecessor weapons for the hegemony. But now, there were human witnesses, and humans were known to be unpredictably honorable. Zarthok opened a communication channel too. Both ships. Human vessel. This is Commander Zarthak of the Hegemony Fleet. You have interfered with official hegemony business. Surrender the Zelari ship and its cargo immediately, and we will allow you to leave unharmed. Jake looked at his crew. They were good people, but they were vastly outgunned. The smart thing to do would be to run away and leave the Zelari to their fate. No one would blame them for retreating against impossible odds, but Jake Morrison had not become a ship captain by taking the easy path. Commander Zarthok, the Zelari are under human protection now. We will not abandon them. Zarthok laughed, a sound like grinding metal. You have one small patrol ship against my battlecruiser. You cannot possibly win this fight. Why throw away your lives for aliens you barely know? Because it's who we are, Jake replied simply. On the Zellar ship, Kethwa listened to this exchange with growing amazement. The humans were going to fight a hopeless battle to protect her and her crew. They could easily escape and save themselves, but they were choosing to stay and face certain death for strangers. Everything she had ever believed about humans was crumbling. These were not the heartless monsters from the stories. These were people who would rather die than abandon those who needed their help. Captain? Veltar struggled to his feet and activated their communication system. Captain Morrison, you should save yourselves. We are not worth dying for. We are just researchers with no importance to anyone. Jake's voice came back strong and clear. You're wrong about that. Every life has importance. Every person deserves a chance to go home to their family. We're not leaving you here.
Right.
Ryan Murphy finished analyzing the enemy ship and reported to Jake. Captain, the hegemony cruiser has heavy shields and enough firepower to destroy us in minutes. Our only advantages are speed and maneuverability. If we're going to fight, we need to be smart about it. Jake looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew, saw Lisa Barnes at her communication station, young but determined. Dr. Grant had come up from the medical bay to help with damage control. Amy Rodriguez was calculating firing solutions on her navigation computer. These were good people who trusted him to make the right choices. Listen, everyone, Jake said. I won't lie to you. We're probably going to die here today. Anyone who wants to leave in the escape pods can do so now, and I'll understand completely. No one moved. Lisa shook her head. Staying, Captain. All of us, Dr. Grant nodded. Those Zelari researchers have families waiting for them at home. So do we, but that doesn't change what we have to do. Amy looked up from her station. Captain, I've been thinking. The hegemony ship is big and powerful, but it's also slow. If we can get them to chase us away from the Zelari ship, maybe we can give the aliens time to escape. Jake considered this plan. It meant using his ship as bait, drawing the enemy away from the helpless researchers. It was dangerous and probably suicidal, but it might work. That's what we'll do, he decided. We'll draw them away and give the Zalari a chance to run. Kethva heard this plan through the open communication channel. The humans were going to sacrifice themselves so she and her crew could escape. She had never heard of such selflessness from any species in the galaxy. Captain Morrison, she called urgently. Our ship is too damaged to run away. Our engines are barely working. We cannot escape. Jake absorbed this information quietly. If the Zalari couldn't run, then there was no point in drawing the enemy away. They would have to make their stand here and now, protecting the damaged alien ship against overwhelming odds. In that case, Jake said calmly, we fight here, all of us together. As the massive hegemony cruiser moved closer, weapons charging and shields at full power, Jake Morrison and his crew prepared for the most important battle of their lives. They were not fighting for territory or resources or glory. They were fighting for the simple idea that no one should die alone in the darkness when friends were nearby. The hegemony cruiser Dominion's fist moved through space like a giant predator hunting smaller prey. Its weapons powered up with deadly energy, and its thick armor plating gleamed in the starlight. Commander Zarthok sat in his command chair, confident that this battle would be over quickly. Human ship. Zarthok's voice crackled through the communication system. This is your final warning. Surrender now, and we will give you a quick death. Or continue to resist, and we will make you suffer before we destroy you. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Defiant Dawn, looking at the massive enemy ship through his main viewing screen. His patrol vessel was fast and well-armed for its size, but it was built for chasing smugglers and pirates, not fighting. Full battle cruisers. The odds were terrible, but he had made his choice. All hands, this is the captain, Jake announced over the ship's communication system. We are about to engage a superior enemy force. We're not doing this for glory or conquest. We are doing this because 12 innocent researchers asked for help, and we said yes. Make your shots count. Lisa Barnes worked quickly at her station, jamming the enemy's communication systems and trying to disrupt their targeting computers. Captain, I'm doing what I can to confuse their sensors, but they're too advanced. It won't work for long. Tactical. Officer Brandon Scott had been planning their attack strategy while the two ships moved closer together. Captain, our only chance is to use the damaged Zalari ship as cover. If we can stay close to it, the hegemony ship won't be able to use their heavy weapons without risking damage to the research data they want. Jake nodded. It was a smart plan, but it meant using the helpless Zalari as a shield. It felt wrong, but it was the only way to keep fighting long enough to matter. Do it, Jake ordered. Amy, bring us in close to the Harmony's edge. Brandon, target their weapon systems first. If we can damage their guns, we might have a chance. The Defiant Dawn moved quickly toward the Zalari research ship, using its engines to maximum power. The hegemony cruiser fired its first shots. But the energy beams passed harmlessly through empty space where the human ship had been seconds before. On the Zalari ship, Kethva and her crew watched through their small windows as the human vessel danced around their damaged ship like a protective guard dog. They could see the massive enemy cruiser firing again and again, trying to destroy their rescuers. They are using us as a shield, Captain Veltar observed. Yes, Kethva replied. And they are doing it to save our lives. Look how carefully they position themselves. They could abandon us and run, but instead they risk everything to keep us safe. The battle continued for long minutes, with the human ship darting in and out of the shadow of the Zalari vessel. The Defiant Dawn's weapons were much smaller than those of the enemy cruiser, but they were precise and well-aimed. Brandon Scott managed to damage 2 of the hegemony's weapon ports, reducing their firepower slightly, but the human ship was taking damage too. Energy beams scorched its hull and knocked out several systems. In the engine room, Chief Engineer Maria Lopez worked desperately to keep the ship running while explosions shook the walls around her. Captain, Maria's voice came through the communication. System, I'm losing power to the main engines. We can't keep this up much longer. Commander Zarthak was getting frustrated. His massive ship should have destroyed the small human vessel in the first few minutes of battle. Instead, the fight was dragging on, and his crew was starting to look incompetent. Enough of this, Zarthak snarled. Prepare the biological weapon. If we release it into space around both ships, it will kill the Zalari through their damaged hull, and the humans will have nothing left to protect. Dr. Grant was monitoring the enemy ship's activities when he detected the weapon being prepared. The same poison that had nearly killed the Zelari was about to be released as a gas cloud that would spread through the area and seep into both damaged ships. "Captain," Dr. Grant called urgently. "They're preparing to use the biological weapon as a spaceborne gas. If they release it, it will kill everyone on both ships within minutes." Jake felt anger burn in his chest. The hegemony was willing to use a weapon of mass destruction just to win a single battle. They would kill innocent researchers and human, soldiers alike, just to get their hands on ancient artifacts. But then Dr. Grant said something that made Jake's anger turn to cold determination. "Captain, I've been studying the biological weapon while treating the Zelari. I think I can modify it to work against hegemony species instead of Zelari. Could turn their own weapon against them." For a moment, Jake considered this option. It would be poetic justice to destroy the enemy with their own poison. It would save his crew and the Zelari researchers. It would be the smart military decision. "No," Jake said firmly. "We don't win by becoming monsters. We're better than that." Dr. Grant sounded confused. "Sir, it might be our only chance to survive." "Then we'll find another way," Jake replied. "We don't use weapons of mass destruction, even against enemies who use them against us. That's what makes us different from them." On the Zelari ship, Kethfa heard this exchange through the open communication channel. She could hardly believe what she was hearing. The humans had a chance to save themselves by using the enemy's own weapon, but they refused because it was morally wrong. Even facing death, they held on to their principles. Marine Lieutenant Danny Foster had been listening to the battle reports from the ship's armory. He came to the bridge with a desperate plan. "Captain, what if we board their ship? Our Marines are trained for ship-to-ship combat. If we can get aboard and fight our way to their reactor core, we might be able to disable their ship." Jake looked at Danny with respect. The young Marine was volunteering to lead a suicide mission against overwhelming odds. "Danny, they have 10 times more crew members than we do. You'd be facing hundreds of enemy soldiers." Danny shrugged. "Maybe, but they won't expect us to try something that crazy. Sometimes the impossible plan works because nobody thinks you'll." "Try it." Jake considered this option. It was incredibly dangerous, but it might be their only chance to stop the hegemony ship from releasing the biological weapon. "How many volunteers do you have?" 12 Marines, sir. It's everyone we have available." Jake made his decision. "Do it. Take your team and board their ship. Target the reactor core or the weapon systems. Give the Zelari and the rest of us a chance to survive." As Danny and his Marines prepared their assault, Maria Lopez reported more bad news from the engine room. "Captain, our main engine is failing. Completely. We have maybe 10 minutes of power left." The situation was desperate. The Defiant Dawn was dying. The hegemony cruiser was preparing to release a deadly gas weapon. And 12 human Marines were about to attempt an impossible boarding action against hundreds of enemy soldiers. But Jake Morrison was not ready to give up. He looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. These people had followed him into an impossible battle to save strangers. They deserved a captain who would fight until the very end. "Lisa, send a message to the Zelari ship," Jake ordered. "Tell them what we're about to do. If we fail, maybe they can escape in the confusion." As the human Marines launched their desperate assault on the enemy cruiser, and as the Defiant Dawn's systems continued to fail around them, Jake Morrison prepared for the final phase of the battle. He had one last desperate plan, one final card to play if Danny's boarding action failed. Jake would ram the Defiant Dawn directly into the hegemony cruiser's reactor core. It would destroy both ships, but it would also prevent the biological weapon from being released. The Zelari would have a chance to escape and tell the galaxy what had happened here. It was not the victory Jake had hoped for, but it was the best he could do for the innocent researchers who had asked for help. Sometimes he thought, the most important battles are the ones you fight not to win, but to prove who you really are. Danny Foster and his 12 Marines flew through space in small assault pods, heading straight for the massive hegemony cruiser. The enemy ship looked like a metal fortress covered with weapons and armor. Danny knew most of his team would probably die in the next few minutes. They had to try. The Marines crashed through the hegemony ship's hull using explosive charges, creating holes in the thick metal walls. Enemy soldiers rushed to stop them, but the humans fought with a fury that surprised everyone. They moved through the alien ship like wolves. Using their training and determination to overcome superior numbers, Danny led his team toward the ship's reactor core, fighting through corridor after corridor of enemy troops. The hegemony soldiers were bigger and stronger than humans, but they had never faced opponents who fought with such desperate courage. On the bridge of the Defiant Dawn, Jake Morrison watched his ship's systems fail one by one. The engines were almost completely dead, and several weapon systems had been destroyed by enemy fire. But he could still control the ship's movement for a few more minutes. Captain Amy Rodriguez called from her station. Danny's team has reached the reactor level, but they're trapped. There are too many enemy soldiers between them and the reactor core. Jake made his final decision. All remaining crew abandon ship immediately. Get to the Zelari vessel and prepare for evacuation. Lisa. Barnes looked at him with wide eyes. Captain, what are you doing? What needs to be done? Jake replied calmly. Someone has to stop that biological weapon from being released. If I can ram our ship into their reactor, it will destroy both vessels. But the explosion will also burn away the poison gas before it can spread. Dr. Grant's voice came through the communication system from the medical bay. Captain, there has to be another way. There is no other way, Doctor. Get everyone to the Zelari ship. That's an order. One by one, the crew of the Defiant Dawn left their posts and made their way to the emergency evacuation pods. Jake watched them go with pride and sadness. These people had followed him into an impossible battle, and now he was asking them to watch him die. But as Jake prepared to ram his dying ship into the enemy cruiser, something unexpected happened. Danny Foster's voice crackled through the communication system, weak but triumphant. Captain, we did it. We've destroyed the reactor core. The hegemony ship is going down. Explosions began tearing through the massive enemy vessel as its power systems failed. The biological weapon storage tanks ruptured, but the poison was contained within the dying ship instead of being released into space. Commander Zarthok screamed orders at his crew, but it was too late. The reactor explosion was spreading through his ship like a fire-consuming dry wood. In desperation, he ordered his remaining weapons to fire everything they had at both the human and Zelari ships. Jake saw the final attack coming and made one last sacrifice. He used the Defiant Dawn's remaining engine power to position his ship between the enemy weapons and the helpless Zelari vessel. The energy beams meant to destroy the research ship struck the human patrol vessel instead. The Defiant Dawn exploded. In a brilliant flash of light, Jake Morrison died at his post, having saved both his crew and the alien researchers he had promised to protect. The hegemony cruiser drifted through space as a burning wreck. Most of its crew was dead, including Commander Zarthok. The few survivors were picked up later by other hegemony ships, but they carried with them the story of humans who had fought beyond all reason to protect strangers. Danny Foster and 8 of his Marines were found alive in the wreckage, badly injured but breathing. Dr. Grant and the other crew members had made it safely to the Zelari ship before the Defiant Dawn was destroyed, as the survivors worked together to repair the damaged Zelari vessel. Something beautiful began to happen. The two species, human and Zelari, started to understand each other in ways that had never been possible before. Kethva watched Dr. Grant treat both human and alien, wounded with equal care and skill. She saw Lisa Barnes help Zelari technicians repair their communication systems, even though they spoke different languages. She observed the human survivors sharing their food rations with the Zelari crew, making sure everyone had enough to eat. I do not understand your people, Kethva told Dr. Grant as he bandaged a cut on her arm. Everything we were taught about humans said you were violent monsters who only cared about war and conquest. Dr. Grant smiled sadly. We can be violent when we need to be, but that's not what defines us. What defines us is what we're willing to fight for. What do you mean? Kethva asked. We fight for people who can't fight for themselves. We fight for the idea that every life matters, whether it's human or alien. We fight because someone has to stand up against bullies and murderers. Captain Veltar, now recovered enough to move around, joined the conversation. But why would you die for strangers? What did you gain from saving us? We gained the knowledge that we did the right thing, Dr. Grant replied. Sometimes that's enough. It took 3 days for rescue ships to arrive. When they did, both human and Zelari vessels came together. The survivors were amazed to see ships from both species working side by side. Sharing resources and information, the story of the battle spread quickly through galactic communication networks. The tale of humans who had answered a distress call from strangers, who had fought against impossible odds to protect alien researchers, who had refused to use weapons of mass destruction even to save themselves. Kethfa became something of a celebrity among her people. Everyone wanted to hear her account of the brave humans who had saved her crew. She told the story again and again, always emphasizing how wrong their assumptions about humans had been. They are not monsters, she would say. They are people who have learned that strength without compassion is just cruelty, and compassion without strength is just helplessness. They have both, and they use both to help others. The incident changed galactic politics in ways no one had expected. Several smaller species that had been conquered or intimidated by the hegemony began to form mutual defense agreements. They called themselves the Haven Alliance, and they adopted a simple motto: no one fights alone. Dr. Grant's medical research, combined with Zelari botanical knowledge, led to breakthroughs in treating diseases that affected multiple species. The cooperation between human and alien scientists proved that working together could accomplish things neither species could do alone. 6 months after the battle, a new ship was launched from a joint human-Zelari space station. It was called the New Dawn, and its mission was to patrol the galaxy looking for distress calls from any species that needed help. Captain Danny Foster, now promoted and recovered from his injuries, stood on the bridge of the New Dawn alongside Science Officer Kethfa. Their crew was half human and half Zelari, working together as equal partners. Captain Foster, Kethfa said as they prepared for their first mission, I have a question that has bothered me for months. What is it? Danny asked. When Captain Morrison first decided to answer our distress call, he said it was because we asked for help. But millions of beings ask for help every day throughout the galaxy. What made our call special? Danny thought about this question for a long moment. I don't think it was special. I think that's the point. Captain Morrison would have answered any distress call he received from any species, anywhere. That's who he was. That's who we try to be. As the New Dawn left the space station and headed toward the unknown regions of space, its mixed crew carried with them a simple but powerful idea. In a galaxy full of violence and hatred, there were still people willing to risk everything to help strangers. There were still those who believed that every life had value, regardless of species or politics or power. The humans had taught the galaxy something important. The strongest species is not the one with the biggest weapons or the most territory. The strongest species is the one that turns enemies into friends, strangers into family, and distress calls into rescue missions. And in the vast darkness between the stars, that lesson began to spread like light, pushing back the shadows.